Well, hello. Chapter 14 of our Bookshop at the Edge. No, the Bookshop at the Back of Beyond. I was getting confused then with House at the Edge Magic. This is the third in our trilogy by Amy Sparks, remember? So, we're up to chapter 14 and we've realised that Dish and Spoon are now together. They're trying to make what we thought was gold, but it's not really gold. There's pink gloop involved now. But the pink gloop has reacted somehow and now it seems to be transforming into something else, which could be what Ophelia is actually after. And everyone else is getting a bit nervous because they know Ophelia's on the prowl, Gazillion is around, and they need to come up with the goods, basically. So let's find out what happens in chapter 14. We are just over halfway, remember. This book's got 22 chapters. Chapter 14. Ah, Auntie Ophelia, said Flabbergast in a voice that was at least an octave too high. And he's quite high anyway. I mean, I'm doing quite high. How nice of you to drop by. We were just getting the kettle on. Ophelia narrowed her cold purple eyes. Your sister told me you'd missed out the steps at the back of the house in your protection spell. You really should fix the spell, dear. Oh, apparently so, said Flabbergast, tight-lipped. Oh, but you have no magic, do you? Such an embarrassing display at the Hopscotch Championship, continued Ophelia, strutting closer. An utter disgrace, if you ask me. Ophelia swished her emerald cloak behind her as her high heels clicked menacingly on the brick floor. She loomed over Dish, whose little mouth dropped open in alarm. Nothing worse than that, is it? When you're trying to do something and then you've got the pressure of someone behind you watching, especially the person you're trying to make something for. Poor Spoon. The hand holding the parchment began to shake a little. Run! Shouted Nine to Spoon, who grabbed Dish's other hand and headed for the kitchen door. Oh, I don't think so, said Ophelia. There was a twist of her wrist and green strands flew out, slamming the door shut. Dish and Spoon exchanged a worried glance and looked down at their pieces of parchment, then at Ophelia. Spoon moved his parchment over the fizzing gold blob on his kilt. Doomed, I tell you, moaned Bonehead. You can't leave beyond yet, said Nine, squaring up to Ophelia. You can't have done all your shopping. The bookshop still isn't open. Ophelia strutted slowly towards Dish and Spoon and towered over them. Well, while I'm waiting, I can deal with you, Professor. Oh, Miss Ophelia, we've made brilliant progress, said Dish, moving in front of Spoon and holding up her piece of parchment. Ophelia narrowed her eyes at Spoon. We? Dish looked at Spoon in absolute panic. Flabbergast dashed across the kitchen, his hand outstretched. Tea cupboard, he called. Ooh, someone's going to touch the tea cupboard. Zap! Ophelia was a tiny jack-in-the-box with fluffy hair and a long nose that reached down to the ground. Nine was now a jar of secrets, balanced precariously on the top of the broom handle. Flabbergast grew taller and bumped his head on the ceiling. Eric sprouted wings and a beak. Bonehead's bones all disconnected and whirled around, chasing each other in a large circle. And Kaz turned to a funny shade of purple, then laid an egg. Dish turned into a bubble and floated towards the table, and Spoon became a giant blob of fizzing, sparkling gold. There was absolute silence for a moment. Then the jar of secrets, Nine, overbalanced on the broom handle, smashed onto the floor and turned back into her normal Nine self again. Nine shook herself back to her senses and looked around at the others, and they returned to normal too. Forgive me, Aunt, gabbled Flabbergast, as he shrank back down to the regular wizard size, and Ophelia's long nose vanished. But I'm sure you will appreciate a cup of tea. Except... He looked sadly at the smashed teapot. Ophelia marched over to the Spoon and held him in the air by one of his spindly little arms. As the parchment dangled from his hand, she stared at his kilt, her eyes wide. Spoon tried in vain to reach for his sword. "Ah, you put me down right now, or I'll help ye all." But Ophelia ignored him. Her eyes sparkled silver with joy as, with her finger, she scraped the golden gloop from his kilt. She flicked it into the air where it solidified and then floated, glinting mischievously in a way that somehow made 9 feel really quite nervous. Ophelia shot a single thread of sparkling emerald from one of her fingertips, and it touched the solidified, not exactly gold, in the air, and boom! There was an explosion of emerald that rocked the house, causing Bonehead's bones to rattle as green drops rained down all over the kitchen. Eric leaned over 9, protecting her from the droplets. And a few seconds later, 9 released the breath she hadn't released that she was holding. She peeked out from Eric's bark-like arms to see Ophelia trying to catch her breath for a moment. Then the older witch threw back her curly white-haired head and laughed. "I'm so thrilled," gabbled Flabbergast, looking as delighted as a dead slug. "Although might I suggest you save that lovely yet slightly shocking trick for special events like birthdays, momentous deaths, that kind of thing." "And that is with one tiny drop, boy," whooped Ophelia. "Wait until I have enough for a locket." Her eyes glinted dangerously. Then watch me put those who oppose me in their place, starting with my sister. Flabbergast gulped. "Auntie Griselda, I agree that on the whole sisters are undoubtedly more trouble than they are worth, but—" She threw her arms wide dramatically. "Too long I have tolerated the backbiting and the power-stealing. I have bided my time, and soon I shall show my sister and every living soul what I truly am." The most unstable, power-hungry witch in all the realms," 9 said sharply. Ophelia whirled to face her and opened her mouth ready to speak, but Flabbergast dashed forward, his hands nervously outstretched to guide his aunt out of the kitchen. "Well, this has been marvellous, Auntie. We should reschedule the tea party when we have a new teapot, which, who knows, could possibly take years. Now, you do not want to miss the bookshop." Ophelia spun around him, twisted her wrist, and green strands taped themselves over his mouth. Flabbergast's eyes grew wide, and his hands dashed to his face. "Silence, you foolish boy," she barked. "Well, I finally have what I am owed," Ophelia said, turning to dish and spoon with a laugh that made 9 shiver. She held out a green finger-nailed hand expectantly. "Hand over the formula." "The—" began Dish cautiously. "The magical gift I was promised." Ophelia threw back her head and laughed. "Come on now. You do not seriously believe you were going to receive a powerful magical gift?" She snatched the parchment from both Dish and Spoon. But I was promised," cried Dish. Spoon's moustache bristled furiously, and he drew his sword from his sheath. Ophelia shook her head. "And you believed it. That is your problem." She narrowed her purple eyes. "And I have a rather regrettable problem of my own. I have access to the formula." She waved the papers she was holding. "But so do you two." Spoon and Dish stared at each other, their little mouths gaping open in shock and surprise. "And we can't have that now, can we?" said Ophelia, tucking the formula parchment inside her cloak. "Can we?" A sick feeling of panic shot through 9. But before she could speak or move, emerald sparks once again shot more from Ophelia's fingertips, this time towards Dish and Spoon. With the quickest of zaps, He became rigid, motionless, an ordinary spoon. His little face disappeared and his spindly arms and legs shrank back into his handle. Dish's face disappeared also. Her arms and legs vanished back into the bowl of the dish. She spun round on her side from the power of the blast until finally the lifeless dish toppled onto the floor. No! Cried Nine. She stared in shock. How? How could she? How dare she? I could use a new bowl, Ophelia said, snatching up the dish, for my pet fang-toothed worms to eat from. Dish and spoon both shrank in size until they fitted into the palm of her hand. Then she stuffed them inside her cloak. You can't. You change them back, pleaded Nine, pointing a finger furiously at Ophelia, tears prickling behind her eyes. Oh, spare them your pity, mortal. You play with fire. You prepare to be burned, Ophelia said bluntly. It was their choice and their mistake to accept the commission. She click-clacked over to Flabbergast and pinched his cheek. Gorgeous to see you, dear. I'll see myself out. Then she stepped back, and before anyone could move, Ophelia threw open her arms and burst into the 1,000 glittery green pieces, which whooshed over to the fireplace and then shot up the chimney. Your aunt, how could she? Raged Nine. She's not called the Unpredictable for nothing, said Flabbergast, as the green threads taped across his mouth disappeared. His face looked like he had just eaten one of Eric's pancakes. Nine glanced at the troll, who was still staring down at the broken teapot. Then he looked at Nine. Spoon gone, he said sadly. Light spoon, spoon friend. His words pushed Nine into action. Come on, she said. We can't let her take spoon and dish. She already has, Kaz argued. I don't fancy my chances against the likes of her. And she said their foolish choice. Don't see why my head should roll to save 'em. This ain't what I signed up for when I came with you to travel the realms. Not sure this is the life for me. I say we visit the bookshop and we get out of here. Madam, said Flabbergast, his shoulders slumped, I fear there is little we can do. Anyone who gets involved with my aunt does so at their peril. My aunt is very powerful, which even without the star gold. If we chased her down, we could possibly have the strength to fight her, and I do not have my wretched magic to even attempt such a thing. I wish, above all, that I did. I really do. His eyes filled with tears of defeat. My companions are my family. Well, this has all rather spoiled the mood. I suppose I should just go back to the closet, said Bonehead, gloomily pushing his chair back. I'll go back to the closet forever. But fire and fury and frustration burned inside Nine. She looked at her defeated companions and the shattered teapot. Maybe you can't help, she said, as an idea lit up in her mind. Should she? Dare she? Did she dare? Oh, this is surely the worst idea ever in all of the realms. Lady Plan? Asked Eric, looking a little nervous. He cradled the handle and spout of the teapot, looking at her with wide yellow eyes. But what other choice is there? Lady Plan? No, sorry, I got that wrong. Lady Plan, said Nine decidedly. She looked at Flabbergast. Will you trust me? Will you trust my plan? Flabbergast stared at Nine, the swirl of frustration, sadness, and defeat clear in his eyes. He swallowed hard. Yes, madam, I trust you. Nine gave the briefest smile in return. But what? Nine wasn't interested in more questions, and without giving anyone the chance to stop her, she ran from the kitchen, down the hallway, casting the briefest of glances at the cloth-covered cage and to the front door, ignoring the voices that were now behind her. Lady, wait! No! Madam! No! We are definitely doomed! No! Oh, blimey. Anyone thought about locking her up? Quite probably. But nothing would make Nine stop. She ran and she ran from the house and darted through the house park, heading towards the town, dodging through the colourful witches and wizards and their numerous floating shopping baskets. Past the towering grid of the hopscotch sports shop, the giant plant pot, and the open snaky mouth of the pest shop. On she ran, thinking how life had been simpler when it was just her all on her own, pickpocketing just to survive. She would never have done what she was about to do. Yes, it had been simpler then, easier, but now life was more complicated and beautiful. As she darted down the cobbled streets of beyond, she thought of Spoon and everything they had been through together. If there was any chance she could do anything. Flabbergast trusted her to make the best decision, and this was the best one she had, so she ran with it. Until she reached the last visible building, the bookshop. Nine stopped, and caught her breath. Unable to resist, she ran up the bookish steps to the front door. There the sign beside it read, "Open in 10 minutes." Then faded and changed to, "Really, really, promise this time." Nine turned down the side of the bookshop, pushing away the desperate desire to break into it, somehow, and discover what her ma had left her for safekeeping. She turned away from the bookshop, and instead, Nine walked on down the side with her hands outstretched. She scrabbled for the door handle, twisted it angrily, and threw the invisible door open. She marched into the blackness, fists clenched, ready for a fight, as the word "shh" appeared on the doormat in blood-red letters, then vanished again. The front door clicked quietly behind her, encasing her in darkness, and for a moment the only sound was Nine's heartbeat, which pounded away in her ears. Then the scarlet words appeared one by one. "Fancy seeing you here." Nine threw forward her arms and swished impatiently at the sparkling words, causing them to vanish. "This is stupid. This is dangerous," she told herself. "This is absolutely the only thing I can think of doing, though." The witch appeared out of the darkness, her cascade of red hair framing her smirking, threatening face. Nine tried to control the shake in her voice as she looked at the witch straight in her ancient blue eyes. "I'm here," she said, "to do a deal." And that takes us to chapter 15. And chapter 15 is called Our Little Secret. Join me next time.